Welcome home, my leadership friends. Today's episode is from fear to focus. Cold water, polyvagal leadership. Let me start with a confession. For years, I thought I was aggressively solving problems, like a Navy SEAL commander. Turns out I was just stressed. You ever have that moment when you realize that you're not working for your happiness and your leadership style was really just your nervous system complaining or screaming, danger, danger, danger? It's sort of like the world's least helpful autopilot. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Not sure why we say it 3 times. That's on autopilot too, right? It's funny. We talk about courage like it's a character trait. But ask any pilot, Marine, ER nurse, firefighter, or parent of a toddler, courage is really just fear wearing a slightly nicer outfit. In today's episode, I want to teach you that your nervous system is awesome and you can train it to work for you. Now, some people do likely need therapy, and I'm not giving therapy. I'm not a therapist. I have a degree in economics and an MBA. I'm giving you techniques, assuming you are normal and healthy. Talk to your doctor if you're having some real nerve problems, but what I am here to tell you is your nervous system can work for you and help you regulate it, like in the earlier episode where I talked about paradoxical intention from that famous psychologist, which can help you to do sales and overcome fear. You, as a leader, can help to regulate your nervous system with some knowledge of your vagus nervous system. Let's get polyvagal. Overcome fears and make this our best year yet. Safe and connected and making people we care about feel like they belong at the same time. I had a professor once. He was a Vietnam vet. Brilliant man, worked like the Cold War depended on him. And he moved at one speed. Full send. I'm wearing my sand tie today. He's doing a full send right here. Anyway, this particular Vietnam vet professor, if you picture him, he's like John Madden. He'd grade papers while pacing. He's lecturing like he was calling in artillery. And patience? Let's just say if you took more than 5 seconds to answer a question, he thought you were an idiot. And he'd look at you like you were waving hand signals to the enemy. I didn't realize it then, but looking back through the lens of polyvagal theory, he wasn't just impatient. He was not just intense. He wasn't just a type A person, which is one of the things I would have given him at the time. He lived in permanent fighter, the middle rung of the ladder, the place your body puts you when it thinks the world is still hostile. And our amygdala, part of our brain, which I just mispronounced, but that part of your brain that tells you look out for trouble, is part of what kept us alive back when there were grizzly bears and cheetahs and lions that might eat us. This particular professor, it made him brilliant. It made him unstoppable. It also made him wired tighter than a Porsche at a 10,000 RPM red line. That's the cost of a lifetime in survival mode. You can get speed, but you lose your softness. You get efficiency, but you may lose connection. You get results, but you may have trouble sleeping and getting along with other people. The cold water rule. Now let's talk about the cold water rule, which is something from my family. And both my grandfathers were master leaders of the family and had high producing, highly effective offspring. And my grandfather on the French side, he liked to have a rule before anyone in the family touched a gun. Splash water on your face first. At the time I first heard about this, I thought it was just old school. Now, I would guess Grandpa had no real knowledge of the vagus nerve, but I think the man was basically a rural vagus nerve specialist without even knowing it. Because cold water on the face does something magical. It kicks your nervous system up the ladder, back into your safe and social. The safe and social state is safer for everyone. In other words, he was teaching us not to shoot from fight or flight, that part of your brain, or from a tired shutdown state of mind like an early teenager waking up in the AM to bird hunt, a foggy brain where somebody might shoot their friends crossing a fence line. He was teaching practical regulation. I used cold water on my face before a test I took this week. It seems to help, but honestly, I like the study better that says eat a Snickers bar. So maybe we could do both, right? Eat the Snickers bar and splash cold water on your face before a test. And it could help. But with my grandfather, cold water was leadership before leadership books, science before science had science behind the theory of cold water. So envision it for a moment. I'm standing there, splashing water on my face, and my grandfather's like, okay, you can now handle a firearm. And I'm thinking, sir, I can't even handle my algebra homework. Like, thank you for this and trusting me with a firearm, but shouldn't we start with a squirt gun first? Because I wasn't into guns at that point in my life. And honestly, I'm not a big gun person. But my idea of hunting often happens at Safeway or Kroger, right? I'm busy doing leadership in an urban environment, not time for hunting most of my life. We all want to be trusted with big things, though, but half the time we're still figuring out how to load the metaphorical squirt gun instead of following the real leader who has real success and experience in what we're doing right at the moment. They have been there and done that. Are you adjusting to take on that resource that has been there and done that? Or are you just thinking because you saw a post on Facebook that you know what's going on? And I see this in leadership a lot, where people are following people who are very popular and, quite frankly, expert storytellers. They get a lot of the attention, the expert storytellers. The professors who have been there, done that, and helped organizations to grow, and the researchers who are behind the scenes, they often don't get the limelight of the Simon Sinek and people like that that are just expert storytellers. And they were in advertising and they did a great TED talk and they have a lot of attention now. Or Gary Vee, who did his online work. He's a real leader and he does a lot of great things for people in terms of, you know, blocking those barriers to success. My grandfather, on the other side of the family, on my Scottish side of the family, he quit hunting because when his hands were cold and he was hunting with his brother, he was walking on some stones and rocks in the Clackamas Riverbed and he stumbled, dropped his gun, and shot the hat off of his brother. Now that scared him and he didn't overcome it and didn't want to. He ended up being a school teacher and he had a lot of coaching students who brought him game and things, and he wasn't opposed to hunting, but he never wanted to do it again after that experience because he thought, I could have killed my brother. Have you noticed that we're mostly talking about stuff like that when our nervous system is working against us? When something goes wrong, it's never, oh my gosh, the vagus nerve is doing great today. Oh, wow, this is so awesome. But no one's bragging about it. That doesn't show up on Instagram. No influencer is posting, just woke up hydrated and fully regulated, baby. But maybe we should, right? Because regulated leaders are rare. Regulated people are rare and they become leaders. If you ever have had the luck and experience like I have where you're going to interview a lot of CEOs, I've interviewed hundreds of CEOs. CEOs are some of the most regulated people you would ever meet. They aren't flapped by anything, and they certainly weren't flapped by me in my interview questions where they could control the environment and it was just one-on-one. They're used to, you know, the nuclear plant burning up or the person that was killed on the job, and they can handle that because they're at a higher level on the ladder. They're on the point of their career where they want to take the high road and do the right thing and be rewarded for it. Most of them are just great people. I'm told that there's a double-digit percentage that might be sociopaths, but even sociopaths like to do the right things for the right reasons so that they can preserve themselves. When you do the right thing for the right reasons, you might even prevent a heart attack, like that hydration I was talking about earlier. A little hydration might prevent a heart attack. Again, talk to your doctor. I'm not a doctor. Anyway, rare things become valuable, and people who are regulated are valuable. Pilots may know this better than anyone. Fear doesn't mean stop. Fear means fly the airplane. Rule number one is don't scare the passengers. I always joke about. But the best way to do that is to fly the airplane, right? And that's what pilots say. They say, aviate, then communicate. Never stop flying the airplane. The FAA suggests it's three things: aviate, navigate, and communicate. And in that order. Notice what the FAA didn't say. Panic, catastrophize, blame the avionics, Google the symptoms mid-flight, have a dangerously concocted energy drink to trick your brain into thinking you're a red cheetah on fire. In fact, the FAA doesn't even allow some allergy medicines, let alone things that might make you hyper and intense. Or in the alcohol world, it's 8 hours from bottle to throttle in the aviation world. Why? Because pilots are trained to act from training, clarity, not reactive chaos. Leadership is aviation for the soul. You keep the wings level, certainly, even when your amygdala is screaming, we're all going to die. You fly through the fear, not away from it. It's part of why aviation gives me a sense of accomplishment. I realize that the laws of aerodynamics are not going to quit, just like the laws of leadership are not going to quit. They're not going to stop. And I've learned to do things in what I expect is a safe manner based on checklists and science and good training. Nearly no one would get into an airplane and just fly away without instruction, right? Yet people get up and think that they can lead without any training or experience. Good leadership should be learned from good leaders with some experience along with leadership science and training too. And some of you say, well, how do you get innovation out of that? There is still room for ideation and innovation and pooling other people. And quite frankly, one of the failures of leaders is not to take the opinions of those people that they hire with talent to do the job. They end up not listening. If you're interested in training, hit me up at beauleadershipgroup.com and email me for information about training. You also can likely join the Maxwell leadership team or participate in one of my trainings. I heard Simon Sinek suggest he who has a why can endure anyhow. His point is fear becomes tolerable when the mission matters. However, I would tell you that as a market researcher, I've seen some business plans that likely Superman and the Pope couldn't get off the ground, right? And one should recognize that Simon Sinek is a great storyteller, one of the best storytellers. And he's great to listen to. And I love to listen to him. And he talks about leadership in a profound way. And he has had great successes after some TED Talks. And he was an advertising guy. He may not have the answers from you and for you that you should draw from. Draw from a broad range of sources. And don't let fear get in the way if you think you're doing the right thing. Sometimes fear is accurately telling you, do not go in the cave because that tiger you hear growling wants to eat you alive. And it's a competitive world. And a lot of us would be better off being leaders in organizations where the product is already decided and figured out. There are a lot of hats to wear if you're starting a company. But following Simon's training, warriors push through fear because people beside them matter. That's great teamwork. Pilots push through fear because passengers behind them matter. Leaders push through fear because the future in front of them matters. Purpose can really turn panic into momentum. I like to say, if you take care of your purpose takes care of you. John Cotter is the Harvard professor and change leadership giant. He suggests leaders who regulate their fear create momentum. Momentum creates belief. Belief creates buy-in. Buy-in creates transformation. Cotter said, people change not because they're told to, but because they feel inspired to. So what are you doing that's aspirational and inspirational? And you can't inspire anyone from the bottom rung of the Polyvagal ladder where fear is existing. Fear doesn't inspire. Connection does. Safety does. Belonging does. Purpose does. Ask yourself, what type of leader are you becoming? I, and dare I say we, inherited some things. Maybe you had a professor who ran on adrenaline, a grandfather who taught calm competence, a body built for survival. We all have a body built for survival, a mind built for meaning. And now you get to decide which inheritance you'll pass down. Not the panic, not the hypervigilance, not the stress disguised as productivity, but the cold water clarity, the courage with purpose, the leadership with heart and humor. Humor brings us together. The warrior who knows peace, the warrior who knows that he has to be most expert at being a warrior, but he also knows that there is a path beyond that to peace. The pilot who knows presence, the leader who knows he needs to care about people because it is the right thing to do. It is the high road, but it is also because no one cares about what you know until they know how much you care. So even the sociopath CEO should care about his people, right? You get to lead with regulated nervous system when you focus on a cold water leadership system, a focus mission, and a clear why, and a heart that stays wide open even in turbulence. People will appreciate that about you and the honesty of it and the authenticity of it when your heart's exposed. Because that's where influence lives. That's where trust grows. And that's where leaders become unforgettable. You belong large and in charge when you care for others. Bless your week. Bless your followers, my leadership friends. If you want more leadership information from me, go to Beau Leadership Group. That's BEAU leadershipgroup.com. And if you want information about polyvagal theory, look up Stephen Porges. That's STEPHENPORGES. He's been working on polyvagal theory since 1996.